In JavaScript, we've talked about our branching control structures already. And now we're going to move on to the second type of control structure, which is looping control structures. And so let's get into a little bit of what looping control structures actually are. So control structures can take a couple of forms in a basic sense. The first type, which we've already covered, is branching control structures. And essentially, branching control structures allow us to decide whether or not to execute code. And sometimes that choice says execute code A or code B, there could even be additional choices of different code to execute based on some value or some kind of result that exists in the program. The other type of control structure, and the type that we're going to be focusing on in this module, is looping control structures. And essentially, a looping control structure allows us to repeat code or repeat a section of the code depending on a value or something that exists in the program. So branching control structures is sort of A or B. Looping is saying we are going to execute this code a certain number of times, and sometimes, or often even, we are executing that code using a different value each time we execute it. So we're sort of taking a list of things and doing something to each thing, or maybe we're counting or enumerating things. There are lots of reasons why we would use looping, and we'll get into some of those today. So why do we need looping? Why is it useful for us in the programming sense? There are several reasons why we need looping. The first is that being able to execute code multiple times is a huge time saver. Think about it. If we wanted to do some action in our program 10 times, if we didn't have a loop, we would have to actually write that code or repeat that code 10 times in order to get that thing to happen 10 times. Now, 10 times may not kill us, but if we want to execute that code like 100 times or 1,000 times, or maybe we want to execute that code over and over and over forever, as long as the program is running, then we can see how quickly things could get out of hand in terms of how much code we would have to write. So repeating code is really important. Repeating the same task with different data is a really powerful idea. If you think about it, there's a lot of times where we have to take the same data or take the same process on data and execute that process with many different things. For example, let's say you have an accounting software that you're writing, and it contains thousands and thousands of accounts for your giant organization that you work for. And at the end of each month, you have to run the same process on each account to make sure that everything is accounted for and all of the account details are in order. If you couldn't repeat that same task using each different account as its data source, you would have to, again, write unique code for each account in the program, which quickly becomes completely impractical. So we need looping for things like that. If you think about programs that you use, how often do you repeat the same thing? Every time we type a letter on our keyboard inside Microsoft Word, and it takes that letter and puts it in the document, that's a repeat task. So if you think about a term paper that's 10 or 15 or 30 pages long, right? How many letters or how many characters are typed into that document? How many times do we click the same button? How many times do we type something into the address bar of our web browser and have it go to a web page? All of those things require looping, require repetition of the same code over and over. And so it's very useful for us to have the ability to do that. If you think about video games, for example, right? In a video game, how many times do we repeat the same task? If you've seen Mario Brothers, how many times does Mario jump and hit up or jump up and break a block with his hand and have the mushroom come out or whatever? How many times have we seen that opening sequence of the Mario Brothers game over and over and over? That is a loop. And in fact, video games actually have a structural element called the game loop. And that game loop just goes and goes and goes and repeats that code over and over and over until the game ends. And so looping is a huge part of almost everything we do in computing, at least past a very basic level. Now, there are different types of loops in JavaScript, and we're going to get into most of those today, although we're going to push one off just a little bit until we get to a more advanced data type that belongs with that loop. But for today, we are going to cover a for loop, a while loop, a do-while loop, a for-in loop is the one we're going to push off till a little bit later, and for of, which is similar to a for in, although it requires a different type of data. The for of is what we're going to cover today. And so those are the loops that we'll cover today. So there are four that we'll cover today and one that we'll push down the road.